I'm CK. Tonight we've got a module from Cubusynth. I think I'm getting that right. Correct me if I'm wrong. It is their 4VCLFO, and I'm going to take a wild guess and say it's a 4-output voltage-controlled LFO. What do you think about that? So we'll take a look at it, put it together, and see how it sounds. Hope you enjoy the video. Here's the bag. Pick this up from thonk.co.uk as I do many of my modules. It's got a QR code for build doc, so we'll take a look at that after we look at the parts. Again, Cubusynth out of Portugal, and a good contact page. So let's see, let's open the bag up. Everything's in bags, which is nice and recyclable. Power cable, of course. Set that bag aside to put it in the recycling bin. And I'm going to assume the circuit board and the front panel are here. And of course I tore it everywhere except across the seam. Let's see, here is the front panel. Let's take a look. 1, 2, 3, 4, those look like pots. And then something here, I don't know whether those are switches or not, pots that are probably setting the LFO rate. Here are the, I'm going to assume, are the output jacks. An aux, don't know what that'll be. So these, again, I'm not quite sure what these are. One of these is a set of jacks, I'm sure. I don't know whether these are pots also. So I'm not sure. Maybe this is mixes it in. It's got kind of a geometric, isometric diagram there. So that might mean something. So I'm not real sure. Oh, look at that. This is clear. So that means there's going to be LEDs behind this that are illuminating all this stuff and making some wacky patterns. Now let's look at the circuit board, and as you can see, it's surface mount stuff already installed. Looks like it's TI part 5BK G4 CK3Y, something like that. There are 4 of them. So that's what's making the LFO. And then, yeah, it's pot, 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 pot. Aux is a jack. And then these bottom 8 are more jacks. See if there's anything on the back. Cubusynth Quad VCLFO SMD PCB December 2022, so it's relatively recent. Looks like there are 4 electrolytic caps going to be on the back, and there's our big old power connector. So that means if this is translucent, that means that there have got to be LEDs here. I would assume. Oh, here they are. They're solder-in LEDs. Looks like 2 colors per LFO. So that's interesting. Here's the rest of the pic. Quad VCLFO. Set this aside. There won't be a bunch of stuff since there's a bunch of surface mount. So we'll figure the jacks, the pots, the LEDs, and the electrolytics. Oh, let me take a look at this PCB a little more. It's good quality PCB, all through-hole plated, even though, I don't know if you can see this. Yes, I'm sure you can see it actually. The support legs for these pots, they've got a figure 8 shaped hole because there's no separation between them, so he's really squeezing stuff together. Which is interesting because on the jacks, he doesn't share ground pins, which often when people are saving space, they're doing that. Just something interesting to note. Whole bunch of stuff. We've got this knob, which feels 3D printed. That's a nice, if it is 3D printed, which I believe it is, that's a nice job. Make good feeling pots. I mean knobs. Here's all the electrolytic caps. They are all 4.7 microfarad, 35 volt. A little bit overkill for eurorack, but better be safe than sorry. Pots feel good. They're 100K, 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 and as I'm picking some of them up, some of them still have the nuts and washers on, so we'll take those off while I'm here, because that's exciting for you guys to watch me take panel nuts off potentiometers. So we've got the big the big 100K ones, and then we've got, oh, I guess this must be, no, I don't know what this is. These are 10K. Yeah, so the big beefy ones, the 100Ks will go up here, I'm going to assume, and the 10Ks will go down here. Where are the LEDs? Okay, we've got LED, LED. Okay, so we've got blue and green LEDs, so there'll be a blue one and a green one for each LFO. Let's see how pretty they are. Oops, don't roll around too much. Put my meter in continuity mode. Put my positive probe on the long leg. Negative probe on the negative. That's a nice blue. Do the same with the green one, just 'cause. It's a nice green also. Okay. So that's the bits and pieces, and there's some panel mounting screws, which we won't use because we use Bafako knurlies to mount all our modules in our racks, because I like them a lot, and because I don't have a case that I have to close up, so I can stand the extra depth of that. So that's the bits and pieces. I will get the soldering iron heated up, bring the build guide up, and we'll put this thing together. Got the build guide up, and it's just dandy. Lots of good pictures. Which is always wonderful. And there's no calibration or anything, so we get what we get when we're done, so it'll be a relatively straightforward and simple build. And just to be clear, and I did not notice this, I wasn't thinking about all the capabilities, it's only a triangle wave, no sine wave, no square wave, which is okay. I prefer an LFO that gives me selectable waves, because I really like to go between sine and triangle waves usually, but that's okay, it'll probably be wonderful anyway. The aux input normalized to the 4CV input, so you can modulate all LFOs with one signal at the same time. So that could be interesting too, to put, so instead of having LFOs doing different things because you've set different rates, you can have all four LFOs putting out the same rate, which is very useful. So let's see what we want to do first, what he would recommend we do first. So we're going to put the LEDs first. Make sure you have the colors placed as below to correctly indicate the LFO's polarity. One of each color represents positive or negative output voltages for each LFO. In this case, green stands for positive and blue for negative voltages. So as the LFO passes through zero, see that's making a sine wave. Maybe I should make a triangle wave. as it passes through 0, I assume the LFOs, the LEDs, will change from green to blue or blue to green, whatever it is. So let's put all these in. He doesn't have... Why does mine not... Oh, that's because I'm going in the wrong place. He doesn't... This board software didn't produce little plus symbols to show you where the positive lead goes, but it uses square solder pads. Don't put two greens on the same side. It uses squared solder pads to indicate where the positive leg goes. So since I'm not putting any resistors on the board, because they're all surface mount soldered already, we'll just call this LED time, and I'll put all these on and solder them down. So enjoy LED time. There's all the LEDs on. Nothing much to say about that. Power connector. It's keyed, so it's difficult to get it wrong. However, I'm going to double check to make sure the keying does match. So yes, the red stripe for negative 12 volts is going to the right place. Always good to know. Now that I look at it, I probably should have put the power connector on first, because it's amidst these LEDs, but then again, these LED leads are right up against the power connector, so probably is better this way. And since we're soldering on the side that's got surface mount components pre-installed, be very careful not to brush your soldering iron up against one of these resistors or capacitors that is already installed, because you might accidentally and without knowing it, brush up against one and maybe overheat it, or possibly you can also desolder it a little bit so it shifts and you don't notice that it shifted, and then you're very sad when things don't work and you can't figure out why. And we don't want sad modular synth builders, because that would create a void in the universe. Now we're going to do the electrolytics. Again, this is going to be a very quick build, and the electrolytics do have a plus sign for the positive lead. They also have indicator for where the negative or body stripe side goes. So select them as you will. And as you can see, probably not going to get these on very parallel because they're on the back of the board, and I don't care. And if that bothers you, well, I'm not the kind of person to watch then. And it looks like we have 2 extra? Do we have 2 extra? Or am I looking? No, there must be something that I'm missing. No. Oh, okay. And also you can customize the LFO speeds. You can change the capacitors to make the LFO slower. And you can change different values for each. So maybe that's what he did. Maybe he gave me a variety. Oh yeah, because this is a 1 microfarad for that one. Okay, I see. They're not all the same. I am going to make them all 4.7s. If I ever want to change this later, I will do that, but I don't want to do that now. So we'll take out the 1 micro. He gives you the range. These 4.7s are good for a variety. Let me see, where's the other one that I have to take out? There's the 6, there's the 1 microfarad. Actually, I'm sitting here thinking about it, and I'm gonna do, the top 2 are gonna be 4.7s, and I think I'm gonna do the bottom 2 with the 1 microfarad that he's supplied, just because that will be interesting to see. Yeah, so let me find the other 1 microfarad. There it is. And these 1 microfarads are rated at 63 volts, which is a ton of current for voltage allowance for a eurorack board. But again, that's not what's important in this build, because we're not going to we're not even close to those voltages. Now, let's put all the knobs and jacks and everything else on the board. And I'm going to do something while I'm doing this. Well, I've got that one in. Oh no, I won't do that yet. Never mind. I just realized what I was going to do was dumb. The only problem with sharing these locking or support lug holes is that makes them a little less friction, which means they slop around a little bit more. But these pots, these plastic handle pots, generally go through the PCB, through the front panel very easily. All the jacks. Now we'll drop the front panel on. And I'll get my little clamp to hold this up. Hold this together for a moment. And what I'm going to do is make sure this one's all tight, and it is. I'm going to do one support leg here. I put a new tip on my soldering iron last night because I wore out, or a couple of nights ago because I wore out my old one. And this is a little thicker. I've got to wear it down. So I'm putting solder. I'll go ahead and solder all these pins on this one, or both of these pins on this one. I'm soldering on 2 of the components, and now I'm gonna put one of the panel nuts on, and no, I am not going to put a washer behind it because I never do, because that's the kind of risk taker I am. And now we'll put the panel nut on the jack we soldered down also. And now everything will stay together and I can get rid of this clamp. And I will do the exciting part of soldering all this stuff on. And while I'm doing that, because you'll be watching it in fast motion, and that was quick, and that's all done. Let me go through with my index card and make sure I got all the connections soldered and nothing's bridged except for these ground pins. They're back to back. All ground pins can go together, of course, because they're all referencing ground. Now I'll put the panel nuts on again in fast motion. I'll put the knobs on, make sure they're all counterclockwise, and try and get the index marks to somewhat line up with each other. Something I'm usually pretty bad at. I've mentioned this before. If you ever see a Marshall style amp that I've put together or repaired with all the 10, 12 knobs it has on it, you'd be horrified because all the index marks are a little bit off from each other. Just not something I'm good at. Now we'll put the power cable in. I'll try to put the power cable in. Why is it binding? There we go. And there it is. That's the front, side, the back, the other side, the top, and the bottom. Now we'll put it in the rack and see how she oscillates. We're up and oscillating. I have both 1 and 2 turned way down, but you can still see on the scope the waveform. The top is 1, yellow is 1, the bottom is the number 2 output, the magenta line, and I don't have 3 or 4 because, again, another reason why I got to buy a 4-input oscilloscope. But I've got number 1 going into the volts per octave on my VCO out here, and I've got number 2 going into the frequency modulation. So let's turn some things up. Oh, you can see right now, if you look at the scope and then look at these colors, you can see the bottom one is green because it's above negative, noted by this little tick over here, above 0, noted by that little tick, and now the top one is above 0, and the little tick and the LED is blue. Now the yellow one is going to be transitioning to negative, and as it transitions to negative and crosses the line, you'll see the blue LED come in. You can see it right there. So you can see how fast things are going. Now I'm going to turn 1 up, and you can see it is absolutely a triangle wave, a very smooth triangle wave, which is nice. Let me turn this up a little bit. Not too loud. Now I'll turn number 2 up, and remember the number 1 has the 4.7 microfarad cap, the number 2 has the 1 microfarad cap. So as I turn that up, that's going into mod, frequency modulation, so you can hear it affecting that. The other thing you can see, and I don't know if I expected this or not, is that the peaks on the LFOs are not in sync. The magenta right now is slightly ahead of the yellow. Let me turn this way up. Let me turn them both all the way up. Now you can see that's the difference between having the 4.7 microfarad on the top and the 1 microfarad on the bottom. And as you can see, the peaks don't ever actually match up. So I'm going to do something else here. If I can find a cable, which I got a million of, but you know how that goes. I'm going to plug in to my other LFO and put that in aux, and I believe that drives them to the same rate. You can see that's what's happening here, so I'm going to pull this back. I'm going to pull these both back. Now I'm not going to put, well, maybe I will. So I'm going to go ahead and put this LFO into the modification for 1 and see if that changes stuff. Well, I don't see it changing. I may not understand exactly what's supposed to be going on, and that's my fault. But that's what we got. I'm going to take this out of mod for a minute and put it in something. I'll put it in here and see what happens. Oh, let me put this. Yeah. So that's what it does. It's an LFO. It's a good one. Nice, pretty little LEDs. It's always fun. Using different capacitors to offset or to have different ranges for the LFO signal is nice. Now, two things that, again, I would want in this. Number one is I would want more waveforms. A triangle is nice, but having a sine, having a pulse, whatever, those can be very useful too. The other thing that I'm seeing here, and I'm not sure I understand why this is, again, the peaks on the LFOs are not matching. And so that means you're not going to be synchronizing your LFO timing. There are some other multi-output LFOs that actually sync their timing. So you may, if that's of interest or concern to you, you may want to think about getting one of those instead of this. But this was a very simple build. I would highly recommend it for your first eurorack module. And in the end, it gives you a useful LFO. Very worthwhile. Hope you enjoyed the video.